I'm so excited to do this. I'm glad I'm excited. And Ollivander decides right now is a good time to come play on the table. So y'all just might have to hear kitty cat noises. Did you know that around 1910 a miner's lighted cap was known as a sunshine? But in southern Appalachia, they called them coonshiners. The miners would use raccoon grease to fuel their lamps instead of pricier alternatives.
Welcome to the Lore of the South.
Follow the show on social media to keep up with what's going on and to see pics that go along with each episode. Search for Lore of the South on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook.
Welcome back to Lore of the South with me, Kelly Cruz. How the heck have y'all been? It's been almost a year since y'all have heard from me. And woo-wee, y'all. As a history nerd, what a time to be alive. I almost dropped an F-bomb. Who else out there that listens that's close to my age? Gen X, millennials, they all like to lump us into groups. Aren't we really like Generation Apocalypse at this point? I mean, we have been waiting for the end forever, it seems like. Well, I guess people have been waiting for the end since the beginning of time. But in our case, it just seems like we've been raised on it. Everything from like the end of the Cold War, Y2K, we grew up on movies like Mad Max, Red Dawn. Heck, a calendar was supposed to end back in 2012, and maybe it did. Maybe that's what's wrong. Maybe that's what's going on in the world. But I have missed y'all, and I have missed doing this, and I'm going to get personal for a minute. So if you don't want to hear about the laws of nature and female complaints, hit fast forward. I have ADHD, undiagnosed. I'll be remedying that soon. But anyway, so I have hit that lovely stage in life known as perimenopause, and I'm a proud member of the We Do Not Care Club. If you know, you know. Well, apparently, when you hit this stage of life and all your hormones crash, it makes your ADHD go into overdrive. Like, it's like being a 6-year-old again. So anyways, the amped up ADHD, it really creates massive amounts of anxiety, inner turmoil, and let me tell you, it is very disheartening when you cannot sit still, but you still accomplish nothing in a day. So it's been a wild ride, y'all. It's a struggle. But producer Mike, he's a champ. The whole family is great for that matter. So in the meantime, while I wait for appointments, testing, and diagnoses and meds, I'm trying to get this out to y'all while it's still burning in my brain. Strike while the iron is hot, as the saying goes. So let's dig up some history-making news. This news comes to us from ABC out of Travis County, Texas. The flash flooding tragedy that occurred there in early July has led to a discovery. The massive flooding washed away about 110 million years of sediment to reveal a trail of 15 footprints from the carnivore known as the, oh lordy day, y'all bear with me. I'm pretty good with my dino names though. Let's see if I can get this one. Acrocanthosaurus. And I googled him so I could kind of tell y'all what he looks like, and he kind of looks like a bent over T-Rex. I'll post pics so y'all can get a better idea. And near those tracks, they also found prints of the Texas state dino, the Plesiosaurus. See, now I can spit that one out because of the Paluxy River, where they found the Plesiosaurus tracks. Plesiosaurus, she was a member of the sauropod family, so y'all think like Littlefoot from Land Before Time. That was what kind of dinosaur she was. The fossilized prints were found on private land. But wouldn't it be nice if someday they were part of a park that might honor the victims of the flood? That's just my thought and 2 cents. Because I really think those things should be where people can see them and experience them. But to honor those children, I think that would be like a perfect fit. What kid doesn't like dinosaurs? So let's get into today's story. This one has a personal attachment to it, and maybe that's why it egged me on to get this out to y'all. Every time we lose a person, we lose a story. And I'd like to pass along as many stories as I can. And this one comes from the Copper Basin, which joins an area of Georgia, Tennessee, and North Carolina. But we'll mostly be talking about the bits that occupy Tennessee and very northern Georgia. Welcome to episode 86, y'all. Copperhill, Tennessee. You've come a long way, baby. My interest in the area began for a very personal reason. My daddy had been born up in this small mining community in 1942. His father, my grandfather, brought my grandma up that mountain as a young pregnant bride, and my dad was born not long after. That is the story that we all thought we knew. So in my mind, I had pictured my grandma, who had been known as like the town beauty back in Gardendale, Alabama. I thought she was living like the coal miner's daughter or something out of like District 12 in the Hunger Games. Oh no, that was far from the reality of the situation. By 1942, the Copper Basin would have looked like a barren wasteland. Picture like if Mars and the moon had a baby. That's what it looked like. These mines had turned the entire basin into a giant red bald spot, furrowed with huge erosion ditches from toxic runoff. But we're going to take you back to the earliest days of Copperhill, before my grandparents were even thought of, and then we'll get back to their story some more. The first human inhabitants in the area were the Cherokee, and they had a permanent town settlement near the river. They were a hunting and farming community, and artifacts show that they were working copper as well. The indigenous people of this area were able to hold out for a bit longer than some of the other bands due to the remoteness of the location. There were no easy ways in or out, and the river could be extremely dangerous. When Andrew Jackson signed into law the Indian Removal Act in 1830, the Army arrived. But it wasn't until 1836 that they managed to get up the mountain and into the basin. And it took them about 2 years to round all the human natives up and force them to walk to Oklahoma. The first white settlers arrived soon after and began clearing the land for farming. It was also at this time that the U.S. had the land surveyed and prices were set for the area at a whole $1 an acre. By the 1840s, prospectors began to show an interest in the area, because right down the way, they found gold. But what they found, it wasn't gold. It wasn't even what they were looking for. They found iron ore with a high copper content, but copper wasn't quite in demand yet. The first iron mine was open in the area, and it was the first to fail. In 1847, the first shipment of copper left the basin. A.J. Weaver loaded a mule train with 90 casks of copper ingots and packed them out of the mountains to the nearest railroad spur down in Dalton, Georgia. Copperhill and Ducktown were some of the first of the mines to do smelting on site. Private smelting companies were like unheard of at this time. That's one reason that they would ship the ore out to processing plants in the industrial north. By 1851, there were 4 mines in production, and these were all the shaft and tunnel kind of mining. You know, pounding the holes, dynamite, and death, y'all. It was a dangerous job in the best of times. But with mining production came advancements, and a road was began. The old copper road, it ran from Ducktown down to Cleveland, Tennessee, and the current Highway 64 follows along much of the same route as the old copper road. The road was 40 miles long, and more than half of it was hemmed in by craggy mountains on one side and the Ocoee River on the other. The road made it easier. It was still a dangerous business of hauling the copper out of the mountains. The trip took 4 days, round trip, and the wagon was stopped for an overnight rest at the halfway point, both coming and going. In 1854, only a year after the road was complete, there were 14 mines listed as open and running. 3 or 4 years go by, and there's only 5 of the 14 still in operation. Seems that several of the mine owners were more of the land speculator variety and had set out to sell off the valuable land and minerals to the highest bidder. In 1858, buyers did come in, and the 14 mines were consolidated into 3 companies, who operated what had been 14 independent mines. And y'all, the Civil War was just right around the corner. The mines were pretty much owned by Northern capitalists, so at the outbreak of war, they sold their shares to their Southern counterparts. Throughout the war, the mines worked at a diminished capacity and were held by both sides, off and on. Though I think the Union probably felt it even more difficult to work with Confederate guerrilla units working in the area, waiting to sabotage the Union's effort at every turn. The Union, they were in their scorched earth policy moment, let's call it, and that policy held true. There weren't any crops to destroy up there on that big bald basin, so they bombarded the only road in or out. After the war's end, and some of the miners who survived began to make it back to the basin, the old copper road that had taken 3 years to dig out of the wilderness, they had it repaired and 2 of the mines up and running, all in a year's time. During Reconstruction, the mining in the area hit kind of a snag. The owners had hit a junction where it was costing more to produce and transport the minerals than what they were making off of them. So mining slowed a bit during these years, during the country's reconciliation. But the railroad was on the way, and it would soon have that far-flung mining town connected to the rest of the country. With the arrival of the train and track system, this really increased the building of the smelting furnaces. And the smelting furnaces are the reason why the Copper Basin looks like an angry red blister for 150 years. To fuel the fires to smelt the ore, timber crews devastated the old growth trees. By the 1890s, the railroads were here, and they came blowing through the mountains, crossing what had once been uncrossable gorges and valleys. In 1893, the smelting was in full operation in the basin, and that was when the real destruction began. When smelting the copper ore, the high temps caused the copper to release sulfur dioxide. Well, that evaporates up into the atmosphere, mixes with moisture in the air, and then it becomes sulfuric acid. So y'all remember all the stories like from the 80s, if y'all were alive, or even conscious. This led to acid rain. It left huge erosion ditches, like I had mentioned before. Picture Mars, and it has like all those huge like craters and stuff just out of nowhere. And I don't mean just like craters, but like veins, deep veins in the ground. That's what these runoffs were like. Like you would have to jump across them to try to avoid them. There was no like going around it. I'll bring in producer Mike here in a minute, and we'll talk about some of the personal stories we heard from the area. But let's get back to some more mining details. That same year, the mines produced around 632,000 pounds of copper, and it was the first to be chugged out by train and down the mountain. The smelting took place right there on the mountains, and at the end of the smelting process, the mining companies would dump the enormous vats of molten rock and metal down the sides of the hills. You can still see the black scars along the hillsides today when you drive through the area. Things could not grow in the Copper Basin. If it wasn't acid rain, it was the toxic clouds of sulfur making its way down to the town. There were no fish in the streams, there were no birds in the sky, or even a tree for one to perch on. It was a hellscape. 50 square miles, or about 32,000 acres, were turned from lush mountain basin into a complete wasteland. 1903, it brought the first lawsuit against the unsafe and literally brutal conditions. The suit was in hope to end the smelting, which was causing the sulfuric acid collection. But the courts decided that the mines were too important to the area and the community. They said that it would be detrimental to the area if the mines were fined or penalized, so it was dropped. Then, the state of Georgia gets involved, and they sued Tennessee over the sovereignty of the state of Georgia's airspace. In other words, Tennessee, please clean up this mess, because we can't breathe over here either. The courts this time sided with Georgia, but no actions were taken against the mines because in that 3-year gap between the two lawsuits, sulfuric acid reclamation had been discovered. And sulfuric acid is a key ingredient in nitroglycerin. So more profits for the company, y'all. The 20s came and the hills were riddled with moonshiners. Then the Depression comes sweeping into the Copper Basin. The once many mines were now consolidated down to just a couple. Many families had to leave their homes in the basin to find work. This was also when the TVA, the Tennessee Valley Authority, started getting involved. And believe it or not, the mines, the companies, actually helped with reforestation projects. And then eventually college students and other scientists came to the area to help the people of the basin reclaim its natural beauty and to find safer ways to mine and to separate the mineral contents. Hey y'all, welcome producer Mike to the show.
Hey guys.
I guess now we're going to talk about the podcast. This is kind of like what we used to do on our Patreon back in the day. All right, so we were just up in that area. We took a little short vacation up to Blue Ridge, Georgia. And how we ended up in this tiny little small town and museum was we were just Googling for local stuff to go find and do, and we saw that we were 9 miles from the place where my dad was born.
Which was kind of crazy.
Well, how do we not go there?
Right.
I mean, like, he's been gone for 24 years now. 23, 24 years, something like that. And he was born in 1942. So, I mean, that was a long time ago in a little bitty place that most people have never even heard of.
No, it was a very, very small town.
Yeah,
very.
So it was just another one of those wild coincidences that we just happened to be so close to it.
But, like, you can throw a rock from Blue Ridge to that town. Like, it feels like it is that close.
Yeah, I think we were actually, the cabin that we were staying in was actually probably closer to Copperhill than we were to Blue Ridge.
Yeah.
But Blue Ridge is a little bit bigger. It was really interesting. It's gorgeous up there. Not a more peaceful location have I been to, I don't think.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's just wild when we go someplace and find another, like a family connection somewhere. Like when we went to Chattanooga and ran into my aunt from Texas. I mean, like, I like these little coincidences.
It makes all the stories better.
And we can say that we've been there. We've seen it. We've been in the same places, you know. It's interesting. So even with like how modern everything is now, it's still so rural up there.
Oh,
I mean, it's like it's 2-lane roads. If you're lucky, they put in a passing lane every few miles. When we were looking up for things to do, we found the Ducktown Mine Museum. So we're like, well, let's just go take a little trip up there and see what it was. And they had the cutest and one of the coolest. I love small town museums. Y'all do not pass those by. Locals put in so much work on those museums, and the two ladies that were at the Ducktown Copper Basin Museum were so good. The older lady's their name was Mrs Joyce, and she was probably about my dad's age, and she was a treasure, wasn't she?
Oh, yeah.
The personal
Sweetest
stories.
little lady, yeah.
She was a storyteller, and the personal notes that she put on things. Like at one point, she took us through the exhibits. We got to one part where it showed like how the miners went down into the mines.
Right.
And they had a locker there. Well, she opens it up. Here I am all hormonal and emotional all the time. She opens up this one locker and pulls out these overalls. And like, these were my husband's overalls from his days in the mines.
Yeah.
He passed away years ago, and I'm like, oh my gosh. And you donated those for everyone, to see. I mean, like,
everyone else.
Yes, yeah. So it was just very neat. I think everyone should experience history on a personal level like that. We got to meet someone who lived there during those times when my grandparents would have been there, and her family had been there for, I can't remember how many generations she told us, but they were a multi-generation family in the Copper Basin.
Didn't she say she had moved back too? Like she had left and came back?
After her husband passed, she went and traveled, she said, and then came back when she was ready to
kind of settle down.
To really settle down, yeah. She went back to the mountains.
And then volunteers in the little...
Yep, in the museum.
That little museum was pretty impressive. It probably wasn't 800 square feet total. I mean, the whole thing. And what they crammed into that 800 square feet was a lot.
And how much we learned, what the mining industry makes off of their byproducts.
Yeah.
Was insanity.
Yeah.
But we'll get into that in a minute. Let's talk about what the mining corporations would have been like from the 1800s through probably about the 20s or 40s.
And there were some pretty awful conditions. I think we learned more about the conditions of what the miners were under when we went to the consolidated mine a couple years earlier, and they had talked about how the drilling actually happens and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and these mines, you can't go in them anymore. They're all tunnel and bore mines, which I mentioned in the podcast and described how that takes place. But there was I think it was almost a mile deep into the earth.
Yeah.
I believe is how many thousands of feet they said.
And the fact that it's copper. So what's crazy about that story is they were looking for gold.
Right.
Because gold was a big thing a few miles
the other way,
to the
down
east.
The road. Yeah,
a few miles down. So they were just prospecting for gold and then end up running into copper. And didn't they say at first that it wasn't even worth them doing? And they ended up coming back and getting it later.
Yeah. Yeah, once, we started messing around with electricity and stuff like that. Well, hell, we've always used copper for making pots and that kind of stuff, too.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's always been a useful product, but apparently it's hard to get it out of the ore.
Right.
So it's more of a process, I guess, separating it. What is the song? Oh, your soul to the company store?
Yeah.
Oh, my soul to the company store. Well, basically what that means is you were sometimes paid in chits or tokens, and the only place that those tokens were good at
was the company store.
Was the company store. You basically were working for housing and board, basically.
Yeah.
But then rent wasn't free. They charged you. That came out of your check every month. And depending on where you sat on the totem pole, as far as what your job was in the mine, was basically where you lived at on the mountain and how much your rent was.
Right. And how far away from the mine you were. Because
and everybody walked. There's only a couple of roads there now. So, I mean, can you imagine what it would have been like almost 100 years ago?
It's probably the same roads.
Yeah. Except for not paved, maybe.
Right, yeah.
The rent cost was anywhere between $5 and $125 a month. I want to say higher ranking you were in the mines, but I guess that's as good a term as any other. The better the location and the better your house would be, your cabin. So, I mean, that's...
And the closer to amenities. So
yes.
the executives all lived in the area where the hospitals and the schools and all of the amenities basically were in Copperhill. Well, and then as you get closer down to the mines in what was it, Duckworth? Ducktown. You got further and further away from the amenities, basically.
Right. Well, and they even had things the Hiawassee or Ducktown Mine, I think is what they changed it to, where there's the Victorian house still sits there that was the big boss's house, was like the overseer's house.
The overseer's house,
yeah. And it's you could see it from the museum when you look down the hill. But yeah, Copperhill, it was the center, is where the company store was located. They had their own little hospital, their own doctors. Everything was taken care of right there, and it was provided to you by the mining companies.
Right.
And I thought this was interesting. A lot of the early miners that first came to the area to settle, they were recruited out of Cornwall. And there's a lot of tin mines and things in Cornwall.
Right.
So they imported some expert miners to the Georgia area. And in that area, there's a handful of last names, and they're all still there, or a bunch of them are. So how it was even discovered that this place was such an issue, it was in such a crisis, such a man-made disaster, that it could be seen from space.
Yeah.
After the space race, and, we won it, we've got satellites. Our first photography satellites are going up in the early 70s, mid 70s. And the reconnaissance photographs start coming back. And there are certain spots on the Earth that they can pick out. Okay, this is man-made, like things like the Great Wall of China.
Right.
Well, then they get over to rural northern Georgia, southern Tennessee, and they're like, what is this?
Yeah.
And it looked just like this big red blister in the middle of a sea of green trees.
Yeah.
And so they got the coordinates for this location, this big ugly blister, and sent people down to find out what was happening in this area and why it looked like it did, and why the deforestation and everything was occurring.
Right.
So even after the TVA came and went and tried to do their thing of replanting, it was still an ongoing process during the 70s.
I mean, it's from the 70s to today.
I mean, the TVA
look.
did so much, but there was still mining and everything going on there, so the pollution was still occurring. And I mean, can you even imagine that? Jumping over puddles of sulfuric acid in your yard?
Miss Joyce told us about how her feet are burned.
Yeah, they said that when they would come home, they'd have to wash their feet before they could go in the house, and the bottoms of their feet would slough off every day. Yeah, but that was Miss Joyce. Yeah, that was a wild story. So they'd have to walk. I mean, could you imagine?
Well, and
she said she goes, even if we could grow grass, she goes, I don't know that we could, because it was one of my jobs to sweep the yard every day.
Yeah.
To keep the dust down.
Yeah. She swept the yard. They played in the ridges and the stuff where the runoff would collect. It was apocalyptic.
Yes.
And that's not
an understatement.
At all. No understatement at all. The way she described it when she was talking about it was just everyday life.
Right. They didn't know any different.
They didn't know any different.
Well, I mean, she said that she was in her double digits before she before she ever even left town. But she talked about how there were no fish, there were no birds, no insects. Like, it's quiet up there, y'all, but there's always nature sounds.
Right.
Always. And she said it was stone silent in that area.
Yeah.
I mean, and they couldn't grow vegetable gardens. They couldn't do anything. That's how dependent they were on the company stores.
And what is still wild is the slag got dumped off of some of those.
Yeah, like some of the mountains, you're like, that could just be a slag mountain.
Yeah.
But it was really interesting, and I don't know how they did it. So, I mean, if we want to talk about my grandparents a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay, so they both grew up in the Depression. He was born in 1917, and she was born in 1920. So they both grew up in the heyday of the Depression, right? Like they were banging it. So she knew how to take care of things. She knew what to do, but Grandma was still prissy. Like she was, I would call her more of an old-timey Southern Belle type, but still could can and do all those things.
Yeah.
So I cannot even imagine what she thought when my grandpa took her up there.
And to be honest, what he thought. You can't go to a place like that, see that. It wasn't like that was all over the place. It was kind of isolated to that area. To go into that kind of apocalyptic thing had to be as much of a shock to everybody who was going. But during the Depression, you're going to get what you can get.
Well, I mean, this was post-Depression. We're now talking 41. So we're through the Depression. The TVA's been through there. So, I mean, even after the TVA, they got there, I think, the winter of 41. And Dad was born in June of 42. Okay. So even after the TVA coming through there, and I don't know if Grandpa went up there first and got the job and then brought Grandma.
Right.
Or if he just heard that there was a boom town happening and he packed her up and went up. We don't know what.
Right.
I can't imagine my grandma going willingly.
Right.
Into that location. But she was a brand new little wife. So.
She was just following along.
Yep. And Grandpa was in and out. He was a wild fella. And she ended up having my dad. And this was in 42, y'all, in the middle of the mountains in an apocalypse village. And my dad was born early. He was, back then they called him blue babies because he was born, he wasn't breathing when he came out. incubators were even brand new, but you had to be in a big city to put somebody in an incubator. Grandma gets a hold of her mama, my great-grandma, and I don't think that woman had probably ever left Gardendale, Alabama. And she got on a daggum bus and rode from Gardendale all the way up into that hellhole.
Right.
No offense to anybody that lives up there. It's absolutely gorgeous now, and y'all have done a wonderful job turning it around. But went up there to that hellhole to rescue my grandma and think to bury her first grandchild because Daddy was born so early.
Yeah.
So, but she got up there and nursed Grandma back to her full strength and made sure Daddy wasn't going to make it.
Yeah.
And bundled them two back off down to Alabama.
Yeah. Well, didn't you say your grandpa too? He didn't stay there for too long. But
yeah, well, I mean, he would have been drafted right after that because, I mean, December 41 was when Japan bombed Pearl Harbor. So Grandpa would have been drafted right after that anyway. But yeah, so that was their little time up there in the Copper Basin. I wish I would have heard more stories about it, but it was always weird because they got divorced like so long ago, like before people were supposed to get divorced, you know?
Right.
That it was always weird to ask her questions about stuff like that. And for some reason, that generation's super quiet about their histories and their pasts and their families.
Yeah.
That's like we'll tell you everything.
I mean,
we ain't got no secrets.
We're doing a podcast about it right now.
But what else did we need to talk about? We talked about Grandma and Grandpa. Oh, kudzu. So, yeah, we've got to talk about flipping kudzu, and I should have looked up some more about it. But because of the deforestation and stuff that took place, well, after World War II, and they found Japanese kudzu, they thought that would be a great way to plant these vines that have like no natural predators here in the United States to try to keep erosion from happening. Right. And then it took over the South.
Oh, yeah.
It ate the South. But yeah, so I mean, like, we've been fighting that stuff since they brought it over here. And come to find out, if you just plant native species in your area, they do the job of holding the erosion at bay. We don't have to import other species into here. But anyways, that's beside the point. We're trying to correct that now, and I don't think there's enough goats on the planet to eat all the kudzu.
No, because that place was covered.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
But did we talk about them flooding the mines?
We did not, no.
One of the other things was like when we went like to Helen and we got to go to the gold mine that was underneath the Super Walmart.
Yeah, that was the consolidated mine. Yeah.
And that was the gold mine that we went to over by Helen, Georgia.
Right.
And that's open for tours. Like it's guided tours. They're not turning you loose now under the Super Walmart.
No.
You got a guide.
Yeah.
But you can still tour those.
You get a great example of what these guys went through when you go into that mine. Yeah.
And I'll post pictures. Y'all know I do. Of what the elevators look like going down into the Ducktown, Copperhill mines. They wouldn't have got me in the daggum elevator.
Don't be claustrophobic.
Let alone under the dang ground. But so after they closed them all up, in the 80s? I think the early 80s is when they were pretty much dried up. And they flooded them. They flooded every single one of them. I guess they shut up off all the sub pumps and flooded the tunnels. Yeah. And I don't know if that'll help probably structurally under the ground. Because it's also, those mountains are granite up there. Yeah. So I don't know if that would help that, but it would also keep urban explorers and those types from trying to get down there and getting into trouble.
Yeah.
Okay, with that, y'all, I guess I'll just do my little sign-off bit. Say goodbye, Producer Mike.
I will see y'all later.
I gotta give a shout-out to Rhonda. Girl, I love hearing from you, and it's been a minute, so I'm glad you're still sticking around. My Patreon friends, I hope y'all are still there, too. It's gonna be a while before we get that up and running. We gotta make sure Kelly can keep her head on straight and write more than one podcast in a year. I actually, little extra side note here. I actually have another one written. We just haven't recorded it yet, so I'm actually a little bit ahead of game. Knock on wood. So we're going to be starting back slow. We'll see how it goes. Follow us on social media. We've got Facebook, Instagram. Producer Mike will probably get back into the TikTok stuff. And you can find our podcast uploaded to YouTube. You can always find my sources listed in the show notes. I'll also include a special link to the Ducktown Museum in case anybody gets up Blue Ridge Way, because y'all really need to go check it out and say hi to those ladies. They do a great job. And with that, we'll talk to you on the next episode of Lore of the South.
Want to get in touch, got a show idea, or just want to say hello? Email the show at loreofthesouth@gmail.com.